Husband mocked me for gaining weight in front of my family, laughed when I got upset, and then tried to blame me for overreacting. Now he's begging me to forgive him, but I don't know if I can. It started as an ordinary Sunday lunch at my parents' house. My family had gathered around the dining table, as we often did, to catch up and enjoy my mom's cooking. My husband, Eric, and I had been married for 5 years, and though our relationship wasn't perfect, I never expected the bombshell he would drop that day. The conversation had been light-hearted. My brother was joking about something ridiculous his kids had done, and everyone was laughing. I was reaching for a second helping of mashed potatoes when Eric suddenly leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Careful there, honey," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You've already been packing on the pounds lately." The room fell silent. I froze, my hand hovering over the serving spoon. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. But when I looked up, Eric was still smirking, completely unbothered by the tension his comment had created. My mom's smile faltered, and my dad raised an eyebrow. My younger sister looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just saying," he replied, shrugging. "Maybe you don't need seconds." I could feel my face turning red. I wasn't sure if it was anger, embarrassment, or a combination of both, but I wanted to disappear. "Eric, that's not appropriate," my mom interjected, her tone firm but calm. Instead of apologizing, Eric laughed. "Oh, come on. I'm just joking. She's so sensitive these days." I pushed my chair back and stood up, my appetite gone. "I'm not doing this," I said, my voice shaking. "Excuse me." I walked out of the dining room and into the kitchen, hoping to collect myself. Tears were threatening to spill, but I didn't want to cry in front of everyone. A moment later, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting to see my mom or sister, but it was Eric. "Oh, come on," he said, his tone still dismissive. "Don't be so dramatic. It was a joke." "A joke?" I hissed, keeping my voice low to avoid making a scene. "You humiliated me in front of my family. How is that funny?" "Because it is," he said, rolling his eyes. "You've been so uptight lately. I thought it would lighten the mood." "Lighten the mood?" I repeated, incredulous. "Do you even hear yourself? You made a cruel comment about my weight in front of everyone, and now you're blaming me for being upset?" He crossed his arms. "Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, it wouldn't be a big deal. You're overreacting." That was the last straw. I took a deep breath and stepped back. "Go back to the table, Eric. I need a minute." "Fine," he said, throwing his hands up. "Whatever." He walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen, my heart pounding. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a moment to collect myself before returning to the table. The rest of the meal passed in awkward silence, with my family clearly unsure of what to say. On the drive home, Eric acted as if nothing had happened. He even hummed along to the radio, completely oblivious to the tension hanging between us. When we got home, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Do you even realize how much you hurt me today?" I asked as soon as we walked through the door. "Are we seriously still talking about this?" he groaned. I said it was a joke. "Let it go." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not letting it go. You embarrassed me in front of my family, laughed when I got upset, and then tried to make it seem like I was the problem. That's not okay." "You're being ridiculous," he snapped. "You're always looking for something to be mad about. Maybe if you focused on yourself instead of nitpicking everything I do, you wouldn't feel so insecure." His words hit me like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe how cruel he was being. This wasn't the man I thought I had married. "I'm done," I said quietly. "What does that mean?" he asked, his tone mocking. "It means I'm done with this conversation, and I'm done with you treating me like this. I need some space." I packed a bag that night and went to stay with my sister. Eric called me repeatedly, but I ignored his calls. I needed time to think. Over the next few days, he sent me a flurry of text messages, alternating between apologies and excuses. "I'm sorry," one message read. "I didn't mean to hurt you." But then, a few hours later, "You're blowing this out of proportion. Come home already." I stayed firm. I needed him to understand that his behavior was unacceptable, and I wasn't going to tolerate it any longer. My sister was incredibly supportive, reminding me that I deserved to be treated with respect. A week later, Eric showed up at my sister's house unannounced. He looked disheveled and desperate. "Please come home," he begged. "I'll do better. I'll go to therapy, whatever you want. Just come back." For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. But I wasn't ready to forgive him. "Eric," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need more than words. I need to see that you're willing to change. Until then, I'm staying here." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. It's been 3 months since that day. Eric has started therapy and has been making an effort to show me he's serious about changing. I'm still living with my sister, taking things one day at a time. I'm not sure what the future holds for our marriage, but one thing is certain: I won't settle for anything less than the respect and love I deserve. Eric's behavior wasn't an isolated incident, and as I've had time to reflect, I've begun to piece together the patterns. Over the years, there had been countless subtle digs, disguised as jokes, and moments where he had brushed off my feelings. At the time, I'd convinced myself that it wasn't a big deal, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But now, with the clarity of distance, I could see the cracks in our relationship that had been forming long before that Sunday lunch. I remember one evening a few months ago when I had spent hours cooking dinner after a long day at work. Eric came home, barely acknowledged me, and sat down to eat. Halfway through the meal, he wrinkled his nose and said, "This is kind of bland, don't you think?" "No thank you, no appreciation, just criticism." At the time, I had laughed it off, telling myself he was just being honest. But now, I realized how little he valued my effort. There was another time, during a friend's wedding, when I'd worn a dress I absolutely loved. I'd felt confident and beautiful for the first time in months. But as we were leaving the house, Eric had looked me up and down and said, "Are you sure about that dress? It's a little tight, don't you think?" His words had crushed me, but I'd pushed the hurt aside, not wanting to ruin the evening. Looking back, I realized how many moments like that I had endured, moments where his words had chipped away at my self-esteem. Staying at my sister's house gave me the space I needed to unpack all of this. She and I stayed up late most nights, talking about everything. She shared her own experiences and reminded me that love wasn't supposed to feel like this. I realized that I had spent so much time trying to keep the peace and make Eric happy that I had lost sight of my own happiness. But even with his progress, I knew that healing our relationship would take time. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. I needed to see consistent effort and a genuine willingness to change. More importantly, I needed to rediscover myself. For too long, I had defined myself through my relationship with Eric. Now, it was time to focus on who I was outside of that. I started going to the gym, not because of Eric's hurtful comments about my weight, but because I wanted to feel strong and confident again. I signed up for a painting class, something I'd always wanted to do but had never made time for. I reconnected with old friends and spent more time with my family. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. Eric and I are still separated, but we've started having weekly conversations to check in and talk about where we stand. He's been patient, understanding that this is a process and that I need time. For now, I'm focusing on my own growth and healing. Whether or not Eric and I reconcile is still uncertain. What I do know is that this time apart has been invaluable for me. It's given me the clarity to understand what I truly need and deserve in a relationship. It's also helped me see my own strength, something I had forgotten in the years I spent trying to please everyone but myself. Recently, during one of our weekly conversations, Eric brought up the idea of attending couples therapy. He said he wanted us to work on rebuilding trust and learning how to communicate better. I told him I'd think about it. I appreciated the suggestion, but I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. For now, I need to focus on my own journey. What I've learned through all of this is that self-respect is non-negotiable. I had spent years excusing Eric's behavior, brushing off his hurtful comments, and convincing myself that I was overreacting. But I've realized that my feelings are valid, and I have every right to stand up for myself. I'm no longer willing to accept anything less than respect, kindness, and love, not just from Eric, but from anyone in my life. Eric is still trying. He sends me updates about his therapy sessions, shares insights he's gained, and occasionally sends small, thoughtful gestures, like leaving a note at my sister's house saying how proud he is of my progress. While I appreciate his efforts, I'm also careful not to let them cloud my judgment. I remind myself that real change takes time, and I need to see a consistent pattern of growth before I can even consider letting him back into my life. As for my family, they've been incredibly supportive throughout this journey. My mom, who was initially hesitant about my decision to separate, has told me how proud she is of my strength. My sister continues to be my rock, always there to remind me of my worth and cheer me on as I rediscover myself. Even my dad, who is usually reserved about emotional matters, pulled me aside one evening and said, "You're doing the right thing. Don't settle." It hasn't been easy, but I'm learning to let go of the guilt and self-doubt that used to hold me back. I'm learning to trust myself again. And for the first time in years, I feel hopeful, not just about my future with or without Eric, but about my future as a whole. No matter what happens, I know one thing for sure, I'm never going to lose myself again. I'm stronger now, and I'm ready to face whatever comes next.